The truth behind the biggest historical lie. Napoleon wasn't actually short. The truth behind the biggest historical lie. Did you know one of the biggest lies in history is that Napoleon Bonaparte was short? For centuries, we've been told that the great French leader was a tiny man with a huge ego. But what if I told you this was nothing more than British propaganda? Today, we're going to uncover the shocking truth behind this myth and how one of the greatest military strategists in history was unfairly labeled as short. Napoleon Bonaparte was born in 1769 on the island of Corsica, which had recently become part of France. From humble beginnings, he rose through the military ranks, becoming a general during the French Revolution. His intelligence, strategic mind, and leadership skills propelled him to power, eventually crowning himself Emperor of France in 1804. Despite his incredible achievements, history has often reduced him to a simple stereotype, a short, power-hungry ruler with an inferiority complex. But where did this idea come from? And more importantly, is it even true? The idea that Napoleon was short comes from a simple misunderstanding of measurements. In historical records, Napoleon's height is listed as 5 feet 2 inches, but this was recorded in French feet, not the English measurement system. The French foot was slightly longer than the English foot. When converted to modern measurements, Napoleon's height was actually 5 feet 6 inches to 5 feet 7 inches in today's standards. That means he was actually of average height for his time. To put this in perspective, the average Frenchman in the early 19th century was around 5 feet 5 inches tall. That means Napoleon was actually taller than most of his soldiers, and very close to the height of other world leaders of his era. So, if Napoleon wasn't short, how did the myth start? The answer lies in British propaganda during the Napoleonic Wars. During the early 1800s, Britain and France were bitter rivals, engaged in a series of wars that would shape European history. The British government and media worked hard to demonize Napoleon, painting him as a ruthless dictator, a warmonger, and, most famously, a tiny man compensating for his lack of height with desire for power. British cartoonists exaggerated his features, making him look much smaller than reality. Satirical drawings depicted him standing next to towering British generals or even being mocked by common soldiers. These images were widely distributed in Britain and eventually spread across Europe, solidifying the idea that Napoleon was a tiny man with a big ego. One of the most famous caricatures of the time, James Gillray, frequently depicted Napoleon as a tiny, aggressive figure. His artwork exaggerated Napoleon's features to make him appear weak and ridiculous, reinforcing the image of a small man with a big attitude. This propaganda was highly effective. Even after Napoleon's defeat and exile, the idea of him being short remained in the public consciousness, passed down through generations as an accepted historical fact. The myth of Napoleon's height also contributed to the popular psychological term Napoleon complex. This term is used to describe short people who try to assert dominance or prove themselves through aggressive behavior. However, Napoleon's actions were not the result of insecurity about his height. He was a military genius and a strong leader. His ambition and drive for success had nothing to do with his physical stature, but rather his strategic brilliance and desire to reshape Europe. The idea that short men are naturally more aggressive or power-hungry is a stereotype, and in Napoleon's case, it was completely baseless. Far from being an insecure man compensating for his height, Napoleon was actually a highly respected and charismatic leader. He had a commanding presence on the battlefield and was known for his sharp mind, confidence, and ability to inspire his troops. Many historical records describe Napoleon as someone who demanded respect not because of his height, but because of his brilliant military tactics and leadership. His soldiers followed him with absolute loyalty, not because they feared him, but because they believed in his vision. He led the French army to some of the most decisive victories in history, including the Battle of Austerlitz, where he defeated both the Russian and Austrian armies despite being outnumbered. Would a weak, insecure man be able to command such dominance on the battlefield? Absolutely not. Despite the truth being well documented, the idea of Napoleon being short has remained popular. But why? There are a few reasons. 1. Repetition in popular culture. Over the years, movies, books, and TV shows have repeated the myth, reinforcing the false image of Napoleon as a tiny dictator. 2. The power of propaganda. British caricatures from the early 19th century were so effective that their influence is still felt today. 3. The Napoleon complex stereotype. The idea that short people are aggressive or overcompensating makes for an easy joke, and Napoleon became the most famous example. Even today, cartoons, comedy sketches, and history books continue to depict Napoleon as shorter than he really was, proving just how powerful historical misinformation can be. While his height has been the subject of jokes for centuries, Napoleon's real legacy is far more significant. He revolutionized France with his Napoleonic Code, a legal system that influenced many modern laws. He reshaped Europe, led one of the greatest military campaigns in history, and introduced reforms in education, banking, and government administration. His impact was so profound that even after his fall, his ideas continued to shape the world. The myth of his height is just a distraction from his true historical importance. So, was Napoleon actually short? No. This was nothing more than British propaganda, a misinterpretation of French measurements, and the power of satirical artwork. The truth is, Napoleon was actually of average height for his time, and his legacy as a military genius, strategist, and leader is far greater than the false myths that surround him. Next time you hear someone say Napoleon was short, you can confidently tell them the truth. He wasn't short. History just lied to you. If you enjoyed this breakdown of one of history's biggest myths, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more hidden history facts.